Hey, folks, welcome to Draft Talk on Pittsburgh Sports Live. I'm Alan Saunders. That's Nick Farabaugh. It is draft week. It is Monday. The draft is Thursday. We are coming down the home stretch of draft preparation for the 2022 NFL Draft. Nick and I were at Heinz Field earlier this afternoon to talk to Kevin Colbert and Mike Tomlin, and we're going to take a pause from our sort of position by position navigation through the draft class and just sort of break down what we learned today, talking with the Steelers general manager and the head coach for the last time before the draft. And to me personally, it wasn't like a lot of breaking news, right? There wasn't like a lot that we didn't know before. And really, we've talked to them a couple times now in the pre-draft process, and it feels just like kind of a lot of the same stuff we already knew. I don't know. What to you was the big news from today?
I mean, I feel like we all knew they were taking quarterback. We came out of today, even again, it felt like they were taking quarterback. I think they went a little deeper in their whole process. I thought that was nice to hear about, their whole process going through quarterbacks. They've watched them. It was all about that. But again, that's more just like semantics, kind of learning their process, which is cool. I like that. It feels like they've done a lot of work on every single quarterback. So they draft one, clearly they're going to be comfortable doing it. I also, and this is just me personally, the vibe I got, I felt like, and other people might get a different vibe from it, I did feel like they're more likely to trade up. I did feel like we saw a lot of comments pointing that direction. Now, I think, Colbert kind of said it's the norm for all of our pro personnel guys to call and set up potential trades every draft. But I don't remember that being mentioned ever before. And maybe that's, just this year and someone asked the right question to get that revealed. But
be just trying to give Brandon Hunt a little bump also, because that's his department.
Pro personnel.
Yeah. So
yeah, like Brandon Hunt's doing that stuff. And I feel like, and then there's the obvious comment that everyone's talking about is, oh, he had thrown out the random 20-7 thing where he said, we will calculate the value to move up to 27 or move back from 20 to 32. And the question is, did he just name those numbers randomly? Is it a coincidence, or did he accidentally slip out and say, yeah, we're talking to the Giants? That's a question I don't think we'll know until it either happens or it doesn't. But I did find that interesting because those are two teams, the Lions at 32.
That's two places that like they could definitely trade to.
Yeah. So it's like you feel like they probably have had those conversations to move either way. Like it makes sense.
They probably had more than that. I mean, let's be honest, especially moving up. There's a lot of, to me, he said they're going to look at 20 players, and say, okay, who would we take first? Who would we take second? And they know they'll get one of those 20, right? 1 through 20. They're going to line them up. And I feel that, but like, I just feel like there's so much uncertainty about what's going to happen. That just talking about the quarterback position. I mean, Todd McShay came out today and said, nobody's going to draft a quarterback for the Steelers. I don't believe that. I think the teams that are in the places that they're in right now may not draft a quarterback before the Steelers, but I think you're going to see some teams making some trades to get into different places, and then you could see some quarterbacks taken before the Steelers go. Could be the Steelers, but like, I mean, they don't have to trade up if Malik Willis falls to them at 20. On the other hand, all three of the top three guys could be long gone. I don't think either of those scenarios are like implausibly far-fetched right now.
I do think Malik Willis falling in the 20s is far-fetched. I can't see it happening. I really can't. I mean, there's too many teams that are in between the Steelers and them. And then there's other teams lurking there, like the Titans, that could trade up and get them. The Lions from 32, as we've talked about, could come up from 32. If Malik Willis gets far enough down the board, they can move up 15, 16 spots up the board and potentially get him. And so I feel like the Steelers, if Malik Willis, I think you and I, we've kind of felt this throughout the process, and we've kind of talked about other positions and everything, because you're not just going to talk about one dude the whole process, but it feels like the crown jewel of their eye is Malik Willis, and it has been Malik Willis. And so I feel like Malik Willis is going to end up being the crown jewel. And so we've seen what they've done the past 2 years to get those guys, right? Trading up for Devin Bush. Now, there wasn't a clear crown jewel in terms of the 2020 draft. That was a little tougher to kind of get. Claypool was actually a mild surprise, I felt. But then you kind of looked at Najee. That was very obvious. And this now feels really obvious. So the question is going to be, how much are they willing to give up and when will they move up? I think if he gets past Seattle, you're going to see them become a lot more comfortable with moving up that board. I think 7's a little steep for them because they're going to have to give up their 2023 first. And I don't know if they would necessarily want to do that. Ideally, now, if they have to, and they know Seattle's going to take them, they probably will do it, I think. But I think like Minnesota at 12, we kind of talked about a few of these teams, like, Philly at 15, like teams like that they could maybe jump the Saints. I think they would do it. And I think they would do it because I don't think it would cost that much. I think it would cost I honestly, if you trade up with say you trade up with Minnesota, what would it cost you? Your first this year, 84, and maybe a third next year? Like, it's not going to be that expensive.
Or this year's first and next year's second.
Yeah, like it's not going to be very expensive to move up to 12. Like, it's just not. So if you're giving up your first round pick this year and you're essentially trading Malik Willis for a second round pick, like that's essentially the trade. Like, you make that. I think you make that. So I think it depends on where you're trading up from. But I did hear a willingness to trade up and a strong willingness to trade up. I think they've explored the avenue very realistically. I think all the signs continue to point to Malik Willis. And I think that's who I truly believe this. I think that is who they are going to end up with on Thursday.
Yeah, the one thing I thought was really interesting is Mike Tomlin was asked about the Steelers and their sort of obvious pursuit of quarterbacks, and he said, "Well, yeah, I mean, when we have a need, we're gonna get into it. And last year we got it. We went really hard into the running backs, and then they drafted a running back. Like, I don't know. I still see a lot of people out there saying like, oh, the Steelers aren't going to take a quarterback. I'm like, I don't know, man. I think Malik Willis is the most likely player for them to end up with, and I might think Kenny Pickett and Desmond Ridder are 2 and 3. I don't know. They're coming out of this draft with the quarterback, and they have the capital, and there's teams that are going to want to move down, so they have the ability that even if the draft falls that one isn't going to be there at 20, they can still go up and get them. Why won't they leave? Like what's the scenario where they don't leave this draft the first round Thursday night with a quarterback? I'm having a harder time.
It starts with Detroit at 2 taking Malik Willis, and then it probably makes the Panthers panicked, and then the Panthers take Kenny, and then you see the other teams panicked, and then maybe you see the Saints trade up and get Ridder, and that's probably your scenario. Because I don't necessarily, and then at that point the Steelers are like, okay, we're
even then they could move back down to 32 and take Sam Howell. I would not put that out of the question.
Yeah, like they could do that, right?
Right, like
that's possible. But if they sit at 20, they sit at 20 there, I think you're looking at like Lewis Cine, Andrew Booth, someone like that.
Yeah, like, I mean, there are other players. We've talked about a lot of them. There are other players I like for the spot. I like the fit for the Steelers. I just, given everything, I am having a very hard time seeing them come out of Thursday night without getting a quarterback. I really am.
I agree with you, and I think they will. You kind of hear all about it and what they've done. They have done so much preparation on the quarterbacks, and if they have, and again, the one possible thing is that they are smoke screening everyone for the first time ever. And the only thing is, if they are smoke screening everyone and they have gone through, by smoke screen, I mean it wouldn't be a deliberate smoke screen. But it would be like, okay, we have gone through the entire process. We have studied these guys as hard as we can, and we have figured out we don't like any of them at 20. We don't like any of them, so we're not going to take any of them. It doesn't feel like that's what the Steelers will do. We've heard Colbert say in the past that he thinks there are multiple starters in this draft, which to me is indicative of what they think the value is. But there's the one thing where we go, post combine, maybe things have changed a little bit, and they're like, okay, we don't think any quarterback's worth our first round pick, so we're not going to take a quarterback. But again, I don't get that impression. I didn't get that impression from today. I think that the Steelers, I actually got that Tomlin specifically was very eager to get to Thursday. I think that they're willing to make that splash. I think they're ready to make the next splash at the quarterback position. They talked about a specific urgency with that spot. And I feel like that's likely where they're going to go. And I think that was the big takeaway.
I feel like Mike Tomlin's excited about it. He wants to draft a new starting quarterback for this team. And he wants, like he inherited Ben Roethlisberger. And I'm sure he was very happy to have Ben Roethlisberger for his entire career, but he's never done that as a head coach. He's never gotten to make that pick and set the future of the franchise in that way. And I don't know, man. I think that's what's coming. I just do. And I think most of what I see from people is like hope that they won't, because people don't like this quarterback class. And I think that's honestly become a bit overblown because while it's not a deep quarterback class, I think there are at least 3 guys that you feel okay about their NFL prospects, and a couple more that look playable.
I do think it's a bad class for quarterbacks, but I would
bet. I mean, obviously, we're not talking about any of these guys going in the top 5, right? That makes it a bad quarterback class. But if you're talking about how it impacts the team drafting at 20, I don't think it really matters that much.
No, but I do think it does change the thought process of everything. It's not last year's class, right? You're not going to have 5 first-round quarterbacks. That's not.
But I mean, if it was last year's class, like you would still be looking at taking the same caliber of player roughly at number 20.
Yeah, I mean,
right? We would just be talking about.
We would just be talking about. We would probably just be talking. I think we would just be talking about a guy like Malik Willis being there 20 more likely. Like that would be something.
Yeah,
so
maybe.
Like you're just going to get a few guys that are inflated a little bit, and you're going to get the stock inflated a little bit. Now it's likely that there's going to be at least one good quarterback out of this class. I think that will happen. I think you'll have at least one good quarterback. Now maybe they're not a franchise quarterback because you do not have a franchise quarterback in every class. But I don't think we're talking about like 2013 here. Now, if you remember 2013, that was the brutal class. That had, I think it had EJ Manuel, that had like Christian Ponder in it. Like that was a really bad quarterback class that had zero business, at least in the first round, doing anything in terms of, like anyone in that class was bad. Now this one I think has the ability to maybe be like 2011. Now that's a season where you had like Jake Locker in that first round. You had Blaine Gabbert. That's where Ponder went.
How about 2019, where it's Kyler Murray, Daniel Jones, and Dwayne Haskins? That feels about right to me, right? Like,
yeah, it could be. I think 2011's good here because I think you're going to end up with someone that's going to be a real like big time name in this class. I don't know who it's going to be. Could be Malik. It could be Ritter taking a step forward. It could be Kenny Pickett being the steady Kenny Pickett he is. I mean, it could be either of those guys. And then, 2011 was where you had Cam Newton at number 1. Now, you don't have that true no one in this class.
I mean, I guess Kyler Murray was number 1 too, but I think it was more of a surprise.
Yeah, and so you had like a Cam Newton 1. You had later in this draft, Colin Kaepernick, who I think someone could. It wouldn't be surprising to me if, I don't really like them as prospects, but it wouldn't be surprising to me if they land in the right spot. If one of Corral or Howell ends up being better than some of these guys that are drafted before him. So like that, and then you get some of the busts in there like Ponder, Gabbert, guys like that shouldn't have been drafted that early. I think that's what it's going to be. But I do think you're going to end up with one really good quarterback. And the question is going to be, who is that guy? And I think the potential obviously is Malik, but I think that it could just as easily be Pickett. I think it could just as easily be Ritter. And then you have that sleeper guy maybe on day 2 in one of Corral or Howe that can really sneak up on you and be, really solid quarterback here, at least for a stretch. Kaepernick didn't have a super long stretch where he was at the top of the game, but you could have, I think, one of Corral or Howe catch fire for a few seasons.
Yeah. Let's get to the non-quarterback stuff because there was a good bit of that. Kevin Colbert was asked twice about the wide receiver market and did not really bite. But I think it's insane the prices for wide receiver right now. But man, are the Steelers in a weird spot with Deontay Johnson? They're gonna have to pay him if they want him to play this year, I think. And I don't really know like what's a fair contract. I don't know. Kevin Colbert was he's generally not like super elaborative, but he was extremely defensive about that topic, and I think for good reason.
Yeah, well, you said you have to be special at that position, and that was the one thing. And I kept thinking over, how do you read that for Deontay Johnson?
Is he special? Because
is he special? I don't.
He does some special things, but he's not routinely special. I think
so. My thought process has always been, this is a classic scenario where we could see a franchise tag come into play. That's kind of where I'm at. Like,
but is he going to play this year?
He
doesn't get a contract, and then they didn't even get to the franchise tag. I don't know.
Oh, and then there's the question of, what does Deontay actually even want? Does he really? Remember, it's been reported 18 million, but is he actually willing to take less than that? Like,
I don't know. I mean, I don't know that I'd like put any stock in that number being reported, but it sounds like a reasonable ask to me, right? Like if I was Deontay Johnson's agent, I'd probably be starting in 20. So like, I don't know, that seems like it's in the ballpark to me.
Yeah, well, I think that the interesting thing that also we talked about though in this is that, he was asked about the depth of the receivers coming out too, and he kind of shrugged that off. It's like, I mean, they're not proven depth until, they come in. So I think there's also a thing about, yeah, well, we do want to keep really good players. So I think the Steelers right now are looking at that situation, and Colbert doesn't really have to worry about it. But I think they're looking at it and they're kind of confused too. They're like, okay, we have a guy with special abilities. He might not be the special player yet, but he has the ability to be special. And he hasn't shown that consistently enough, but we have seen stretches where he is the special guy. So do we just bite the bullet and pay him? Because like, what do we do like here? Like seriously, I don't know I think Deontay Johnson's contract situation is one of the most fascinating in the NFL right now, because he is a bona fide wide receiver one when he's on his game. And then that's the issue though. And there's the mental stuff, right? It's like, okay, the drops get to his head. He gets a crap ton of false start penalties. I mean, that's not good. He'll sometimes run the wrong route. He'll sometimes not finish a route. He's
not great in traffic. He's not like,
no.
He's not slot versatile, which isn't like a deal breaker, but it's just one more thing that when you put in the pile when you're trying to do the math, and I just don't know if it adds up. I think maybe the best solution here is some kind of bridge contract. Tear up the last year, this one, give him like, I don't know, 17, like 334, and then let him hit free agency again, still in the prime of his career. I don't know. That seems like it could make sense. I don't see them going like the big money, like Antonio Brown contract for him right now. I just, with what the market is, I mean, Antonio Brown's contract would be a great deal for him now, because that's like the 30th biggest wide receiver contract given out since then. The market's insane. And I don't know. This is why I thought the Steelers were going to try to re-sign Juju Smith-Schuster, because I think if you re-sign Juju, then you have the leverage to say, well, if he doesn't want to sign, we can either franchise him or let him walk or figure it out and whatever. Now, if they do that, they're in a bad spot.
Yeah, well, I mean, I came away from that, more so than like, I think that he took subtle hints at Deontay. I mean, you could kind of tell who he was talking about. And my thing with that is that I think that they are in a wait and see mode with Deontay. They want to see it 1 year, right? Like, give us the full thing. Last year, it felt like, okay, he has finally arrived. I think through 13 weeks, it would have felt perfectly right to give him the deal, right? Like through 13 weeks, he was fantastic. He was on that career pace, and it just felt like down the stretch, he kind of just lost it. I don't know, that he did not have a good playoff game. That playoff game for him was really tough. He had multiple drops in that one. Had a big drop against Baltimore. I mean, he had a few really bad plays down the stretch, and it didn't feel like he ended the season well, but the stats, just everything about his stats, his efficiency numbers, all that stuff has just gone up. So the statistical stuff has improved. And so that's good. But the question is, the consistency hasn't necessarily. And he put together, again, 12 to 13 really strong weeks last year in the season. And then as it felt like down the stretch, things kind of fell apart a little for Deontay. And so, again, this is a guy that could be a special player. And I think there's just not many guys that run routes like he does. I don't think there's many guys that can do what he does after the catch. But until he finds consistency, he is really kind of this, I don't know, he's this like frustrating player where if that earlier, demand, the earlier reported demand was $15 million. I would pay that to Deontay. Like, I would pay that to him right now. That's
for how long?
Are you going like 3-4 years?
7-15? Is this a lifetime contract? I
don't know. I mean, like, I would pay him 15 a year pretty easily, because that's wide receiver 2 money in this market. But you're talking, 18 mil a year isn't even that rich.
No,
technically.
It's not. That's the thing, is that like, I'm questioning whether he's worth money that is being given to players that I'm sure he's better than. Like,
he deserves the same money as Kenny Golladay and Christian Kirk. Let's be real.
Kirk got what? 584?
Yep.
Come on.
So
I
so
just
that's so the
this is
12th.
the store if I'm the Steelers, this is the store I can't afford to shop in. And then I don't know what happens. Maybe you just tell them play out this year and we're going to let you hit free agency and I don't know.
Yeah. So like if you look at the top annual guys that are being paid, 18 mil a year, Christian Kirk, Kenny Galladay. Then you have 19.25 Michael Thomas, about 20 a year Brandon Cooks. 2020, you have Mike Williams, Amari Cooper, Chris Godwin. Then you get a little bit above 20. It's Keenan Allen. Then you have DJ Moore, who's above 20 million as well. And then you have the big dogs and Diggs, Hopkins, Adams, Hill up there. But that's the thing. It's like really interesting because the guys in his bracket right now are Kirk, Galladay, and Lockett. And so those are three guys who, I mean, I think he's definitely better than Kenny Galladay. I think he's definitely better than Christian Kirk. Lockett is kind of a throw up. I mean, Lockett's good. I think he's more.
Deontay.
I think I would too, because Lockett's a little bit more of a one-trick pony, I think. And meanwhile, you kind of have everything
Deontay's
with
younger.
Deontay. Yeah, he's younger. And then you see all of that, and then you look at Deontay and you say, okay, I'm paying him. If I pay him that, I'm paying him top 12 receiver money. And is Deontay a top 12 receiver in the NFL? I don't think
it just comes back to where we started. Is he special? And
is he special? And I just don't think he is. Again, I think he's a wide receiver one in the NFL, but he's not a high-end wide receiver one. And those are the special guys, because you can find those low-end wide receiver ones a lot more than you can find those high ends. And he has the ability to be one of those high-end guys. I've said that. And he's still got that potential. He showcased that potential last year. Again, through 13 years, I would pay him $18 million.
And we're thinking that the Steelers are going to draft a day 2 wide receiver to me, which just also says that, like, you don't need to draft a day 2 wide receiver if you're going to lock up Deontay Johnson long term. Mm-hmm. You can roll with Johnson, Claypool, and go sign a guy and be fine. If they go day 2 wide receiver, that feels like not. I don't know. That to me feels like they're not signing Deontay Johnson to a long-term contract, because that's an investment in the position that they don't necessarily need if they have him. Kevin Colbert said he feels like he has playable starters at all of his positions. I would love to know who he thinks his playable starter at slot receiver is, because I feel like I disagree, but he thinks there is one. And who am I to say he's wrong?
They are going to draft one very early, though.
Right? I don't know, like Steven Sims, I guess, or Anthony Miller. I don't. I mean, with respect to those guys, I think if they were that good, that have found their way past Ray McLeod on the depth chart last year.
I agree. So I don't know who their starter is going to be in the slot. I don't know what they're going to do.
Maybe
there.
It's Chase Claypool, but then it's Cody White outside. So I'm all in on Chase Claypool into the slot. I think it's a great idea, but then that still leaves them short one starting wide receiver. They don't have a real tight end 2 option either. It's not like they're just going to go play the whole season in 12 personnel. As good as Zach Gentry is, he's not that guy either. Let's wrap it up with some just like quick stuff before we go that I want to touch on. Stephon Tuitt, still don't know what's going on. This is a problem. Now, are they lying and they do know what's going on? They just don't want to say, maybe, but I don't know how they can go into the draft not knowing whether their starting defensive end is going to be on the team or not.
I think they can know. Tomlin was a little cheeky when he said it today. He kind of gave a little gleam smile and he said, but he's doing well. And I'm starting to lean towards him coming back.
So if he's coming back, why not just say so? I
don't know.
Why the
sometimes
mystery?
You don't know.
So,
I mean, if they truly don't know,
it's bad.
You're at the spot where you have to figure.
They need to know. They needed to know in March, really, but they really need to know now. Like they need to know.
They need to know. It does happen.
And there's and the other thing is there's 2 levels here, right? Like they need to know, and they need to be able to trust that there's follow through. It does not feel to me throughout this process like the Steelers have known what the hell's going on, right? And so if the Steelers don't feel like they've been in the loop, even if he says, "Oh, I'm coming back," or "I'm not coming back," they may just sit on that because they don't trust it, right? They don't want to be the ones to put it out there. So I don't know. The whole situation is look, I have a ton of sympathy for the guy and what he went through. It's not easy to lose a loved one, and some things are more important than football. And I would have a lot of respect for him if he decided that he didn't want to play football anymore. That would be an incredibly big of him and mature decision if he wanted to prioritize his mental health and his family's well-being over continuing to play a game that he's already made millions and millions of dollars from. Do it, man. I'm good on that. I just don't understand how we're 10 months later and nobody knows what the hell is going on. It's bizarre.
Like,
and
that's the question. Just
it's a big issue.
You talk about the Steelers knowing what's going. Like you talk about the Steelers knowing what's going on. Does Stephon Tuitt even know what he's going to do yet?
I don't know.
Is that decision made? That's the question.
I don't know. Again,
I feel like it is.
Anything other than no update. No update.
Like I feel like it is. I feel like he's coming back. I think they've dropped subtle hints to that. He's been working out recently with Cam Hayward a little bit, so I feel better about that. So you feel like he's getting a little bit more in there. So we'll see. That's going to be the biggest question when we start voluntary minicamp. That'll be the biggest thing. If he's there, obviously great. If he's not there, the saga continues.
Well, minicamp is mandatory. OTAs are voluntary. So I guess we'll see. OTA is coming up in May, minicamp, end of May, early June, somewhere in there. And then we'll be at St. Vincent before you know it, Nick. Anything else you want to hit from today before we kind of wrap things up here?
Backup running back seems like it's going to happen. I felt like that was a pretty veiled
question by Noah Strackman of Sports Illustrated to hit on that. I think we haven't talked about it enough this offseason that they need someone to take some of that load off Najee Harris.
Yeah, and I thought, I'm not gonna lie, I chuckled a little bit when Tomlin said that their resumes speak for themselves, and I said yes, they do. They are not good enough. Yeah. And then you kind of, Tomlin has this type of, tone that he uses where at first he's like very optimistic. And then eventually, as you kind of start getting into it a little bit, you can kind of glean little hints. And he said, maybe there'll be outside competition that they'll have to compete against. It sounds like to me, they're going to add one here late day 3. I thought that was likely coming into the draft. I think it's more likely now. So I think they'll end up picking a running back at some point in this class. We'll see who that ends up being, but I'm guessing that the Steelers will add a running back to that room. They badly need a running back. So really no surprise on that. So they do need a running back. Another thing I thought was fairly interesting overall was the analytics thing that he said. Talking to the baseball side of things, I think is a really interesting way. I've never really heard of another NFL team talking to baseball analytics guys a lot. But we now know how they use analytics. They don't use it for the draft. They use it for their pro stuff, which is kind of interesting. I think that's fairly interesting is that, okay, they actually do have like a pretty robust analytics department in terms of the pro personnel style stuff. I think Colbert even said Tomlin knows a lot of analytics. Like that was something interesting. So they've studied it, but they have kind of decided, okay, we're only going to use it on the pro level. We're only going to use it there. We're not going to use it.
Seems like they're doing a lot more of the analytics into scouting than they are the analytics into, I don't know, say clock management.
Yeah. Yes.
Notoriously pretty bad at that one.
It wouldn't surprise me if they have, the analytics fed to Tomlin, and Tomlin is just like going with this gut a lot. Tomlin's a lot about feeling, and Tomlin's a lot about, okay, this feels right to me. So I feel like Tomlin sometimes might overrule the analytics a little bit on some of their decisions. So that is interesting. I thought that was a really interesting answer from Kevin Colbert. I think it's actually a pretty solid process to talk to the baseball people, because I think it is kind of applicable in a lot of ways, because you're translating from one level to the next. And we're not talking necessarily about AAA to MLB. We're talking about, college to the NFL, which is in like, pro ball. That's like, we're talking about high school to whatever you play in right away. So it's a big jump. So you really can't kind of take off that. So I like that. You're comparing apples to apples rather than oranges to apples. So I like that fact. I also think that there was a few tidbits in this one where you could kind of glean that it felt like, at least to me, that the Steelers are looking to add a DB. Specifically when he was talking about Edmonds, saying like specifically, he wasn't even asked necessarily about it, he kind of just said it out of nowhere where he's like, it won't preclude us from adding anyone at that position, anything. And I just kind of was like, yeah, I mean, it makes sense. We kind of knew that they were going to look at safety pretty hard in this class, but I do think that adds a little bit more credence to it, that they could definitely add a safety. The center position doesn't look like they're going to add a center. It feels like they're just going to let it play out, which makes sense. They have 4 centers on the roster already, so it makes sense to let that
Like
play
that old
out.
adage, if you have 4 centers, you have none. Or did I do that right? I don't know. They have a lot. So I think they may have 3 guards. I don't know. But yeah, I think that's, it wasn't a hugely long conversation, or in my mind, hugely informative, but I do think it did just sort of reiterate a lot of what we already thought. And hey, that's pretty good for us, right? If we're not getting swerved at this point in the game, then we must be on the right track. And you should all be on the right track if you've been listening to Draft Talk every day leading up to the 2022 NFL Draft. Nick and I would not lead you astray in case we're wrong, and then I'll just delete all this later. But, hey, we went to the Senior Bowl, we went to the Combine, we've been to Pro Days, we've been there with them, and if we know like 10% of what they know about football, then we'll have figured out something about the 2022 NFL Draft. We're going to keep going with this. We're going to wrap up the last couple positions here, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, leading up to Thursday night's draft. Nick, anything final before we roll on a Wednesday, very late edition of Draft Talk?
Yeah, no, nothing really. Again, kind of broke it all down. Colbert not really saying anything revolutionary in this. I don't really feel like after you talk 4 times throughout the draft process, you're going to say anything revolutionary, but feels like to me that I think we're all in agreement. Quarterback feels like the position that the Steelers will pick at 20 or somewhere else in that first round range.
Sounds good. That's Nick. I'm Alan. Thanks for listening, as always, to Draft Talk on Pittsburgh Sports Live. Like and subscribe to the YouTube channel for notifications when our show and every other show here on Pittsburgh Sports Live goes live, and you can be the first to know. Also, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Transistor, wherever you find podcasts, you can find us. Just search for Draft Talk with Alan and Nick. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time, and enjoy the rest of your night.